So here we are in the PyCharm editor, and if you want to start a new file, you can just go ahead and access the menu here, and you can select new. And from there, you just give your file a name, whatever name is needed for your file program, if it's assignment 2 or whatever you want to call, whatever it's going to be called. And after that, you can start typing your code. Okay. Now, what we want to do here is just look quickly at variables and how we accept input. I have two numbers here, num1 and num2, and I'm just using this as a way to just test a program. Okay. So as you can see here, I have a function here that will add the numbers together. It's at the top here. It's not doing anything because I haven't called it yet. If I go ahead and run this function here, it's going to ask me to enter the two numbers. So it's going to enter the first integer. I can type 8, I can type 6. Okay, nothing happens because I haven't called the function, right? If I want to call the function, then I can go ahead and say output is equal to the result of whatever my function will do, alright? So I type it exactly as it's spelled there. I'm going to make sure I put num1 and the num2 there, and then I want to print what the output has. Alright, so let me go ahead and run this now. So now when it asks me for the numbers, so when I enter them, I'll actually see what the total is, okay? I mean, I could have said the total is 15, but let's look at this section here. This is going to assign whatever we type here at the keyboard into num1. The reason why we have int here wrapped around the input is because anything that you type at the keyboard is text, not numbers. So to convert that number 8 to an actual number, we have to use the int. So in two steps, here's what it would look like. It would look like num1 is equal to input and just this section here. So in other words, just that. But then that num1 would actually not be something that you could use in a calculation. So then you'd have to do something like, say, let's use a different variable name, equal int, and then you wrap it around what num1 was, okay, to convert that entry at the keyboard into a number value. Don't worry so much about it, just know that if you're accepting numbers at the keyboard, you'll have to wrap your input around an input bracket like that, okay? That's why you have two brackets at the end here, because you're actually putting a function inside a function. But just use this pattern here when you're accepting numbers at the keyboard, okay? And you'll be fine. Just wanted to explain to you why we have that int in brackets in front of the input statement. So we have two numbers here, and this does addition. But what if we want to calculate something like an area? And that's going to give you a hint on how to do the answers for your programs, for your assignments. We can create as many functions as we need. Doesn't matter if we don't use all of them. And let's say we want to accept values for calculating the area of a square or a rectangle. Alright, so just to make this quicker, I've gone ahead and typed it out. So we're going to have two values here, length and width. And that's going to be whatever we type in at the keyboard, okay? So let's see here. We have integer 1 and integer 2, okay? And here we have length and width. So how does this work? It means that this is a different variable name here. So if I want to see what the result is, yeah, it's going to be calling that here. So see area equals whatever the function does here, length times width. You see it up here. When you call it, that's what it does. It jumps up to this section here and it does the calculation. It's going to multiply the length times the width. It's going to send the area back to this function here. So let's just run it and see how it works. Alright, the length of the rectangle, let's say 3, let's say 4. And see the area is 12. 3 times 4 is 12. It's also asking us to enter an integer for the addition program. Alright, so I can probably comment that one out or just delete it right now because we're not going to be using this. So let me just delete that. I haven't saved my program file yet, but of course you want to make sure that you save your program regularly. Alright, so once again, let's run it and use different numbers. Let's use 6. Make sure I click down here. And then 7. Okay? Alright, what you're learning here is how to actually create a function and then use that function to do whatever task you need to do. In this case, we're finding the area of a shape, which is a rectangle. You can call it whatever name you want. That's allowed in Python. You can't start a name with a number. There are some rules that you should have read in your textbook already. But we can just say, for example, we can call it anything. We can call it area of of rectangle. We can say it like that, okay? But then we have to make sure we use the same name anywhere that we're going to call the function, okay? So it's not called calculate rectangle area. We've now changed the name. It's doing the same thing to area, and notice that it has a capital O inside of it, so we have to make sure we're case sensitive there. So it's going to do the same thing. Let's run it again, and you'll see it's asking me to enter. I keep typing in the editor window. Sorry about that. Let's go here. Oh dear. I typed something here that I shouldn't have. I put a number there. Let me go ahead and run again. Alright. Okay, great. So here, just as we did with the addition program, we have the variable length that is going to be whatever this input is at the keyboard. And we have the word float here because we may have a decimal number. So when you want to use decimal numbers and not whole numbers, you use float instead of int, okay? And then we go ahead and we calculate the area, so we're calling the function similarly to how we did it with the addition function, and then we're printing. The F here is a special formatting that allows us to use the variable name in a fancy way like this. Okay, if you don't want to do it like that, remember you can always print it out in the let me not do that. Let me just paste back the original program that was there. And okay, all right, never mind about that. But previously, okay, so I have area there, so I could have done something like print the area of the rectangle is, and then I'd have to put a comma and then the variable like that. So that's another way to do the exact same thing that you see here. But when you do it like this, it looks a little bit cooler. But if that troubles you a bit, no worries. Let me show you to prove to you that it works. I'm going to cut out this section here. Let's run the program. Let's go 5, let's go 3. Alright, see, it prints the text, the area of the rectangle is. So if you want to use the format string, which is what that was, this technique is, you can do that, or just do it the regular way like that. Now, having done all this, you want to practice doing the same code. Then now, what if you're asked to find the area of a circle? You need to know the formula to get the area of a circle. So what you can do is, you can go on Google, and now Google gives you a formula that gives you the area of a circle. So you need variables for area and radius. Now, luckily for us, we have a special library that includes math functions. So you have a math Python library, and we can use this to actually simplify our code. Alright, so to get pi from this, we would import math. This will give us access to something. Let's just get rid of all of this here. This will give us access to what the pi is. So for example, we need radius. We need a variable called radius, right? Let's just give it a static value here. We're not going to use the input at the keyboard just now, right? We know we're going to need pi. Now pi can be set at 3.14 as a standard value, right? But if you want it to be more accurate, you can actually use whatever the math.pi calculates, right? So you could say math.pi. Alright, that actually will give you a value that you can actually, it's more accurate. So if we were to print pi, for example, let me just show you what it looks like. It's a little more precise than 3.14. It goes 3.14, and it gives you some more digits for more accuracy, okay? So that's why you're going to use that. But we're not going to be printing pi, right? We're really interested in getting the area of the circle. Now the area is pi times the radius squared. How do we get squares in Python? We get squares by using the double asterisk. So for example, if I wanted to say 2 squared, it would be 2 like that. And let me show you what this looks like when you print. So we go here and let's run. Oh, so sorry. Let's go ahead and run the code again. Alright, so it prints 4. So it's squaring whatever the number is in front here. So if we put 4 here, 4 squared is, let's see, 4 times 4 is 16. And if we put 5 there, 5 times 5, that's what the 2 here means squared, is 25. Okay, so now you understand how squares are done. If the area of a circle is, as we saw in Google, pi times the radius times the radius squared, then our formula looks like pi times radius squared, right? Which is the formula we saw in Google or in a math textbook. But of course, we have to make this look appropriate as a Python statement. So how do we put this correctly as a Python statement to find an area? Okay, we're going to need an area variable to hold that value, right? Because we have a radius variable here and we have a pi variable. Okay, great. So we could say area. What is area equal to? Well, okay, I'm using the features of the Pro version, so it already gave me the auto-completion. But remember, we don't need to use math.pi here because technically we did create the pi variable. Well, it will work the same way, okay? It's just that we had an extra step here for the purpose of making it clear what's inside of math.pi. Now, we have all these variables here that are ready to run, and they don't do anything because there's nothing to be printed here. Let's put this into a function so that we can actually have it work. All right, and we're going to do that right now. Okay, so we have our variables and all that information is there. What could we call our function? We're finding the area of a circle. We can call it area of circle. I mean, it's like, it can literally be that simple. All right, now we know we need to have a radius as a parameter inside, right? Because that's what's going to be accepted by the user. We need to know what's the radius of the circle. If you want to see what radius looks like, you can Google for a picture of what the radius looks like in a circle, okay? We're not going to do that for the purpose of this video. And what do we want to send back to the main program? We want to return what calculation? The same one that we would have done here for area, right? So all we would need to do is just copy this here, or cut it, I should say, and move it here. Because we're actually making this into a function, so it looks more modular, it's more neat, and yeah, more flexible. So, okay, we want to import math above this, so let's go here. Should always be, when we're importing any modules, should always be at the very top. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead now. So we have the radius there, and we just need to have the area calculated now by the use of our function, right? The advanced auto-completion feature gives me the name right there. So once I have the radius known, I can just go ahead and print whatever the area of the circle would be. Alright, so let's go ahead and run it and see what's... Okay, I need to fix an error here. Let me just get this real quick. Oh yeah, so I should have had math.pi here. So I'm not going to use the pi variable since I'm turning this into a function, right? So that's going to make a difference. Alright, so my syntax error is that I can't assign the value in the return statement, right? I'm just going to return the calculation because this is actually what the area is, okay? And then it will be assigned down here. So it's just sometimes you have to be careful, backtrack, and trace the logic of your program to make sure that you're doing things the way that Python works with. So we've calculated the area, and it's going to be sent here. It's going to take the radius that we're sending here. It's not going to be an input, but we're going to change this to an input, okay? But let's just test the program first. And there we go. There's the area of our circle. This special formatting here, make sure that it only gives us 2 decimal places, okay? So you can just pattern your program similar to this. Now let's change this to make sure that we get an input. Now remember how we had the input before? This is going to be a floating point, so first of all, we need to have a float to make sure that we change whatever the enter at the keyboard to, a decimal point number. And then we're going to ask for the radius of the circle. So now we're going to be asked for something at the keyboard. So now the program is prompting us, enter the radius of the circle. Let me enter 6. And then it gives us the area. Okay, and there you have it. Now I should add more comments throughout the program. So I could say here, used for accessing math library. You don't have to do that for this line really, that's not necessary for this line. But you can say here, um, ask user for the radius. Alright, in your own words, okay? Remember, always want to be unique in your own words. You're not going to use the exact same variable styles, variable names exactly as you see it typed here for the function. Create your similar names, okay? Because of course, imagine if everybody's typing this exact program looking the same, that's going to be a problem. This is a fairly common assignment for any programming class. So your lecturer will expect you to have something that looks similar to this. It's going to use math.py, so everything is going to be repeated to a point, but don't make your program look exactly like this, okay? That doesn't make any sense. If you have any questions, always feel free to contact me, send a message, leave a comment, alright? So I hope this explains a little bit of how to use variables to accept input, how to create your own functions, and specifically how to create functions that find the areas of shapes, okay? See you in the next video.